Hello friends and welcome back to Monster Monday. On today's episode, I have a really wicked creature and I'm going to give you ideas for how to use it in encounters, adventures, and whole campaigns. Get yourselves ready for the Vargouille. I have no idea what the pronunciation of this monster is, but it's spelled V-A-R-G-O-U-I-L-L-E. So because I can kind of speak French, I'm thinking of it in a French way, like Vargouille. Maybe it's a Vargouille. I don't know. But anyway, this creature goes back to early editions of D&D. And I had to do a little deep dive on the history in a D&D Wikipedia, and it listed it as going back to AD&D, first edition, but it has manifested throughout the editions and evolved. I'm going to give you some information based on its history, but also its 5th edition incarnation and its incarnation in Castles and Crusades. So let's start off with the basics of this creature. Imagine a weirdly misshapen, mutated head with bat wings sprouting out of its temples. That is the Vargouille. This is a creature that you could easily throw at a low-level party for some fun. And as always with my Monster Monday tips, you could amp this up, throw a few more hit points into it, or decrease it if it's, too effective in its pain. But it's a great opportunity to integrate some lore into something, not just for an encounter, but even for an adventure or a whole campaign. Let's dig in a little bit here. Shrieking, flapping, and hideous to behold, with a body like a severed head and bat-like wings in place of ears, Vargouilles boil out of the abyss to infest other planes of existence, where they are a menace. Each Vargouille carries a disease that creates more of its kind. A flock of Vargouilles on the wing is a plague of chaos and evil waiting to happen. One of the biggest things about this is it has a special ability, which we'll get to in a few minutes, that basically creates more of itself, right? Now, if you've watched Monster Monday, you know that I have an affinity for the undead. This is not undead, but it can be construed in that way, and you could rework it in that way. In the same sense that like the idea of a zombie horde is plaguing an area, a town, a region, you could have these plaguing an area, virtually anywhere in your campaign world. They are not specific to a certain geography or a climate because they're fiends. They can come to anywhere, from anywhere that fits your lore and your world. That's one of the things I love about them. Very flexible. The idea that they can attack and do, damage, but more importantly, their special ability to infect their victims, that's the crucial part here. So let's look at how this manifests in 5e. They are considered tiny fiends with an armor class of 12, 13 average hit points, a speed of 5 feet, or a flying speed of 40 feet. So right off the bat, when you have a flying monster, it can make things fun because they can swoop down, make their attack, and fly away. And anyone who is just melee based would be challenged. Now, your spell blasters and your ranged people, they'd have a better chance of taking these dudes out. But again, if you wanted to throw 1 or 2 of these at a low-level party, it would totally work. You can upscale them if you have a mid-level party with either a greater quantity of these, like maybe a flock of them, 6, 8, 10, or you can ramp up their hit points a little bit, or give them an AC boost while they're flying. Very flexible. Could you make these fearsome opponents against a high-level party? Yes, but we'll get into that. Here are some of the things that make them pretty deadly. They have damage resistance to cold, fire, and lightning. They have damage immunities to poison. They have condition immunities to being poisoned. They have dark vision. They understand abyssal, infernal, and basically can speak any language that the person, the original host body, knew before it became one of the Vargouille. However, they can understand, but they cannot speak. We'll get to why they can't speak in a minute. Imagine that your NPCs in this region have been attacked and infected by the Vargouilles. What happens with their infection is that it turns the new person who's infected eventually into a varguil. That process is pretty cool, and it's not super well laid out, so there's some flexibility in how you interpret it. Just like in a lot of zombie movies, sometimes once somebody's bitten, it's almost instantaneous, right? Like think of 28 Days Later, like that movie franchise. The infection takes hold right away. Other times in other zombie movie genres, it might take hours or days or even weeks before the infection to take hold and the person turns into a zombie. So in that same way, in that same kind of light, you have some flexibility in determining how long it takes for a person who's infected to become a varguil. But the process is pretty insane. The kiss of a varguil infects a humanoid with a fiendish curse. If allowed to run its course, the curse brings about a gruesome transformation as an abyssal spirit invades the person's body. Over a period of hours, the victim's head takes on fiendish aspects such as fangs, tentacles, and horns. At the same time, the person's ears grow larger, expanding and transforming into wing-like appendages. In the final moments, the victim's head tears away from the body in a fountain of blood, becoming another varguil, which often then eagerly laps up its own life fluids. Sunlight, or the brilliant illumination of a daylight spell, can delay this transformation, and varguils instinctively shun bright light as a result. So that's a little bit of the lore built into the 5e version of this monster, but you don't have to use that. You can decide that they are not sensitive to light at all. You could decide that they have no problem with sunlight, that doesn't matter at all. How is this different from a disease? Well, here's the thing. So in some iterations, the varguil's bite is effectively a disease. So maybe a higher level kind of remove disease or cure disease sort of spell could work if you wanted to make this a little easier for them to deal with. But you could also look at it from the more arcane idea of it not being a biological disease, but a curse, a magical curse. And that might require a remove curse, or maybe in some gaming worlds, it's more than a remove curse. Maybe you need a greater restoration spell. So that's where you, as the GM, have the flexibility to make this either less challenging or more challenging. And here's another tip from me. You don't have to make it consistent. You could create lesser varguils whose bite could be cured with a simple cure wounds spell, like minor cure, that's like the least powerful, right? You can make kind of a mid-level varguil, that maybe it has to have a cure disease or a remove curse kind of spell. And then maybe a higher level varguil, and that can only be cured through like a greater restoration, right? So you can kind of create your own tiers of this monster and build it into your lore. If the victim is cursed and a fiendish spirit enters them, aren't there different levels of fiendish spirits, right? So maybe a greater fiendish spirit creates a more powerful, a greater varguil. Just some thoughts for you for how you can scale it and the lore attached to scaling it so that you have the consistency, but you keep the players on their toes and they don't always know how to cure this infection, right? And also, just as a side note, remember that if your players are in a group who are typically kind of heroic adventurers and maybe good or neutrally aligned, they're not just going to stand by while like NPCs throughout the countryside, city, town, whatever your setting is, get infected. They're going to try to help, right? And so maybe part of this is unlocking the mystery of like, what are the cures for this infection? That creates adventures in and of itself, right? Because then they have to like research and find out what the lore is and find out how to stop this plague from spreading and where is patient zero or where is the flock of varguils? Because maybe the varguils do move from place to place and they kind of hide out in different areas. And as the party and maybe their allies, NPC allies, are trying to find the varguils and destroy them so they can stop this plague, that creates other adventure opportunities. So very easily to go from an encounter into something that becomes a multi-part adventure. Let's talk specifics about the stat block, and then I'll tell you the differences about the varguil from D&D to Castles and Crusades. So they have the ability to do a bite. They do piercing damage plus poison damage. So their bite is poisonous. Again, pretty deadly. So if you're throwing these at like a low level party, maybe you just reduce the amount of damage that their bite or their poison damage does, or you make it a lower DC save against the poison. The Stunning Shriek. The Vargouille shrieks. Each humanoid and beast within 30 feet of the Vargouille and able to hear it must succeed on a DC 12 wisdom save or be frightened until the end of the Vargouille's next turn. While frightened in this way, a target is stunned. So that's actually two conditions, to be stunned and frightened, which again is pretty powerful. Like if you're throwing these at a mid-level party, that would give them some challenge. Here's the purpose of them being stunned though. It's so that the Vargouille can fly in and give their kiss, which I'll get to in a minute. If the target's saving throw is successful or the effect ends, the target's immune to the stunning shriek of all the Vargouilles for 1 hour. So that's a benefit to making their saving throw. And again, you can scale this for a mid or higher level party by making the shriek have a greater range or have it be a higher DC for the saving throw, all ways that you can adjust this. Let's get to the kiss of the Vargouille. The Vargouille kisses one incapacitated or stunned humanoid within 5 feet of it. The target must succeed on a DC 12 charisma save. And as we all know, very few people have proficiency in charisma saving throws. So that's another thing to keep your players on their toes. The cursed target loses 1 point of charisma after each hour as its head takes on fiendish aspects. The curse doesn't advance while the target is in sunlight or the area of a daylight spell. Don't count that time. I love when games have special monsters with special features because it adds a little something to the mix, doesn't it? So not only are they cursed and their body is basically afflicted with this infection and their physical features are transforming, they're losing charisma. When the cursed target's charisma becomes 2, it dies. And it tears its head away from the body and becomes a new Vargouille. Casting Remove Curse, Greater Restoration, or a similar spell on the target before the transformation is complete can end the curse. Doing so undoes the changes made to the target by the curse. Okay, so if you want to be nice, you can follow the rules as written in 5e. As many of you know, I feel that 5e is sometimes a little too easy. Sometimes the ways of solving problems and obstacles and challenges are a little too easy. So use your judgment, think about your group, but I know for me, if I was going to use these, I would not make it that easy to resolve this curse. For a mid-level or higher level party, that's way too simple of a way to get rid of this affliction. So I would maybe make it so that, if you do a greater restoration, you stop the process. But whatever charisma you lost in that time is permanent. I think that would be awesome. Because now how do you restore that charisma? Well, it would have to be something epic, like a wish spell. And I never give out wish spells because it's too powerful and it breaks your game. How is this different from the Vargouille's interpretation in Castles and Crusades? So in Castles and Crusades, the Vargouille's basically the same thing, but it doesn't have the same effects. So the Vargouille in Castles and Crusades, when it does damage to you, it's permanent hit point loss to your max hit points, right? So if you had a character who had 30 hit points and they took 8 hit points from the Vargouille, their new maximum hit points is now 22. So you ask, well, which one of these things is worse, right? Is it worse to lose permanent charisma or is it worse to lose permanent hit points? I think a lot of players would say that the permanent hit point loss would be a way bigger penalty, which again is cool and deadly and one of the many reasons why I like Castles and Crusades, because it has that old school risk factor that I feel like a lot of modern gamers don't get because 5e makes it a little too easy for people to resolve these problems. You can find a balance for how to adjudicate the Vargouille's kiss and the effects of it. And maybe, hear me out, maybe you can pick and choose, right? As I was talking about before, you could have different tiers of Vargouilles, a minor, a lesser, and a greater Vargouille, right? And each one of those, you can kind of pick and choose which effects and what the DC save is for, the different effects. Or you can integrate some of the Castles and Crusades stuff where people lose permanent hit points. You can choose. You can make each one of these Vargouilles like their own subspecies of the monster with its own effects, with its own challenges, its own, hit points, AC, all other modifiers. I think that's one of the things that makes this really cool. But let's talk story. So how do these go from just being something that you throw at a party? Well, you create a scenario, right? So where did they come from? They came from some hellish place, right? And in your world, whatever that setting is, you figure out a big bad guy who sent these to plague whatever the region is where the adventurers are in. And why? Why did this big bad end guy do this? Before you even figure out who it is, why? What does the BBEG want? What do they want? Why did they send this plague to this location? This opens up a whole plethora of opportunities to connect this and these ideas to your campaign. I like thinking about factions. So maybe in the region or the kingdom where your players are, whether they're passing through that area or it's their home base, their home region, maybe there's some factional thing that goes back to some previous thing where a group of heroes or legends of the realm were able to, defeat this demon. And this demon was banished back to some pit of hell that exists in your gaming world. Well, demons want revenge. What better way to get revenge than for that demon to tempt somebody in the region with power and opportunity? So the demon made a pact with some other faction that opposes the good guys in your region. And that other faction opened up a portal so that the demon could start sending Vargouilles and fiendish spirits into that area. The idea being that the demon will send these Vargouilles and just plague this area until the demon has acquired enough spiritual power, right? Harnessing these spirits and using that spiritual power to bring itself back into this domain. And then the faction that it allied itself with, their reward is they get to take over the mortal power of this domain, while the demon is still going to be able to manifest now in this plane of existence and in this domain and begin expanding his own power. And the Vargouilles are just the first volley into that, right? So this is literally a way that you could take this one monster idea, start off with some little encounters here and there, and build some mystery around it. Like what's causing these people to mutate and become deformed. And then you have the encounters, the first encounters with just a few Vargouilles, right? And maybe it's like an NPC that the players have come across before, like some shopkeeper that they know, or like a bartender, or maybe like a traveling merchant, right? Who's the first one afflicted. And then other people throughout the region start reporting of these weird afflictions, and these Vargouilles are starting to grow in numbers, but you haven't explained what they are, how they operate, and then you throw them at the party has to fight them, maybe they defeat them, and now they're trying to figure out what the hell is going on, literally, the hell. They don't know any of the faction background lore that you've created. They don't know who the demon is, because demons don't share their true names. But as they level up through other adventures, you keep popping these situations in, and you kind of build it gradually. And you reveal little clues and hints about what's going on. Maybe they discover that there's this other faction somewhere in the region that's very covert and very secretive and arcane that is working against the good guys, whatever the good guys are in your campaign. And then they start to have some encounters with these cult members, or with the stalwarts, the warriors of this cult. And maybe they are able to infiltrate and find out some information about the cult, and they find out about some mysterious demon that the cult worships, but they don't get the demon's name. And then maybe your players are investigative and they want to research more, and then you drop a few more clues about the backstory related to this. And all of a sudden, these Vargouilles are becoming more powerful, right? So as the players, as their characters are leveling up, you start to throw those mid-level Vargouilles at them, And then maybe once they're getting a little confident, you throw a greater Vargouille, just one. And that one can, do all the things, the shriek with the greater range and the higher DC. And maybe when they defeat that, they find some other major clue leading them back to this whole faction war and the demon and what's going on. And by this time, more of the countryside has been plagued with these Vargouilles. It's a super cool, very flexible monster that you could definitely integrate into any climate, any geography, any region in your gaming world and use them effectively. And take little bits from what you want from whatever edition of D&D or from Castles and Crusades and tweak it to fit with your world, to make it fit even better. So I hope you've enjoyed this little dive into the Vargouille. And if I got anything wrong, please comment and let me know. If you like this, please like it. And if you aren't subscribed already to the channel, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you any money. But if you happen to have any extra money and you like to support the content on this channel, you could join my Patreon for any number of dollars a month that you would like to join. Until I see you again, I wish you happy gaming.
Well, hello, and welcome to Bill Allen World. I am Wizzy, the Wizard. I'm back once again to remind you to subscribe and click on the notifications button, and also watch videos that are over there. Tune in to the next episode of whatever show you were just watching, and watch other shows featuring Bill. He made me say that because he's a narcissist. Okay, bye.